morning. Dr. J's Beckett, Sports Card Insights. Woke up early, had an idea, turned on the microphone, so forgive the poor quality, but just had an idea that woke me up. So the next 15 minutes, you can listen to a hypothetical, which could turn out to be a real situation. So just food for thought. Thanks sponsors, Topps Panini, Upper Deck, Heritage Auctions, Hug of the Scott Auctions, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, Burbank Sports Cards, ComC.com, and Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication. So here is my discussion with myself. An episode about authentic, altered, and contrast with eye appeal. The guy that evaluates eye appeal by blurring out the number and then looking at it. But it's hard to evaluate eye appeal based on not knowing what the technical grade is, whether it's good for the grade or not for the grade. Otherwise, you have what I did 1,000 episodes about, which is FCG or front and center grading, which is just looking at the card and really judging it by that. And it's much simpler, but really very similar to what they're talking about with eye appeal. When we were starting BGS, we realized the average person really cannot grade very well. It really does take training. And when people are criticizing the expert graders who have been trained based on their untrained eye, of course, they're going to have differences that, I submitted this, it should have been a 9 and it got a 7, but they're not expertly trained. And for the most part, I believe there's a much higher degree of consistency than you think with expert graders, even among companies. It's not perfect, but most are on it, or a half point, and a half point can really matter. But I'm not sure a half point matters any more than the eye appeal. So a 7 strong for the grade maybe is equal to an 8 weak for the grade, and that's a way of evening out this perception that there's variability among graders. Really, I think the variability of the technical grade is less than the variability of the bump or the decrement that you get for either excellent or poor eye appeal within an accurately described technical grade. But on the other hand, when you look at this and you think about a card that is being held up and you can't see the grade, you can't see the flip, you could just see the card, it could be authentic altered. You really can't tell. I may have mentioned this in my FCG episode, is that when you're looking at a card and you don't see a grade there, it's hard to tell if it's been altered. If it's a 71 Topps baseball and it's had black magic marker to dab one of the corners that showed a little bit of wear, the graders are going to pick this up. I'd like to say 100% of the time, but let's say 99% of the time, it's easily discovered with black light, and all the graders are doing that. If they're not, they're going to get scammed, and I don't believe the ones that have been in business for a long time, the major grading companies, that stuff is getting through. Same thing with trimming. Okay, now the problem with trimming is if you present an oversized card that has been trimmed to proper size, sometimes the graders will have trouble telling whether that was done at the factory or whether it was done at a later date. But if it meets the minimum size requirements, then in many cases, that's going to get through. And again, there are tricky ways to make it look like this later cut is an original cut. But if it's 90-degree corners and meets the minimum size requirements, in many cases, that's going to get through. On the other hand, with FCG, if something does not get through and it gets an authentic, altered, trimmed card, and then you look at the eye appeal and you think, gee, that's a really nice, authentic card. In fact, it looked like a 9 to me, but now I can see that it was altered as the flip is uncovered. And wow, am I going to pay a price that's equal to a 3 because it's authentic, altered, trimmed? If it's just slightly trimmed, I'm talking about microscopically trimmed in order to deceive. And there should be a penalty for deceiving. Many of the trimmed cards are from childhood, innocent, just childish cutting of cards, as opposed to at a later date where you're deceptively trying to trim it to deceive, to manipulate. But you can't know when it's submitted. The grader can't know the motive. On the other hand, there are certain kinds of trimming not done when I was a kid. In other words, a very long, exacting kind of trim. Most of the trimming from when I was a kid that people in my neighborhood did, of the different neighborhoods I lived in, were amateurish. In fact, I bought collections that had 52 Topps trimmed down to 52 Bowman size just because some kid thought, they didn't even have plastic sheets. They just, I don't know what they were thinking, but they just did it. But what's to keep somebody from, once the card is altered and it's been trimmed, Here's the moral dilemma. I've done a lot of episodes, and basically, I'm not going to run out of episodes because I occasionally will make commentary about some of the podcasts that I listen to, which are excellent, and maybe go a little bit further or bring some additional insight or the way I see it. Plus, there's a bunch of things that just aren't being talked about, things that I can do from my experience or just different things from being in the hobby a long time. Well, what if you take an authentic altered card and alter it further? I'm not saying that's benign, but what I'm saying is you get the card back. I got a card back from BGS. I thought it was going to be a 6, and it was a vintage card, and they said, it's authentic, it's altered. And I couldn't see that it had been altered. Again, I'm not a great grader. My eyes just aren't as good. But then I looked at it, and I thought, what? And there was like a notch in the lower right corner. Not a notch, but it looked like it had been cut. I don't even know why somebody would do this, because I clearly was not a boyhood card for me. I didn't have the 54 tops when I was a boy, but I picked them up in collections, and this is some card that had not a right angle corner. It's almost impossible to think that would have been done at the factory. That's just not the way they cut cards. So maybe there was like a soft corner and somebody took some scissors and cut off anyway. So it's not very perceptible, but when you then look at it, you can see. And again, I've heard criticism of BGS. Yeah, they give you subgrades, but they don't tell you which corner. Come on. If you know you got a low grade on the corners, you've only got 4, actually got 8 to look at on a standard card. You got the front and the back. And if you look and bring out a microscope, you can figure it out. Same thing with the edges. There's 4 edges there. Just look at the edges and figure out where there's damage. Same thing with surface. Now, some of the surface things are very subtle, but not a 7 or a 6 on surface. So there's a lot of information given with the BGS subgrades. Centering, I mean, come on. If it's a 7 centering, what more do you need? Again, you look at the front and the back, you look at the top and the bottom and the right and the left. It's, 70-30, 80-20. The subgrade for centering is based on the degree of flaw, whether it's barely noticeable. At any rate, so this 54 tops card that has the problem in the right corner, in the margin of the card, it's not into the picture, but it's in the lower border. What's to stop me or somebody else from busting out that slab and getting out a more sophisticated way to, I mean, it's already an altered card, but further alteration to make it 90 degrees. In other words, just to shave off, again, already it's altered. So by shaving off some millimeters to bring that back to a right angle and to improve the eye appeal, and then to resubmit it. I mean, I wouldn't sell it raw because that would be deceptive. So clearly that would be an attempt to deceive, to get it out, because it would look much better because it was a nice looking card. So you send it back into grading, and probably ethically at the same grading service. So they're not thinking this is a brand new card that the pop report, although I don't know that people are caring about pop reports that much for authentic altered cards, but it's the same card and you've altered it further to improve the eye appeal. Okay. And so it comes into the grading service. They can see you've enclosed the flip from before. You say, I just did this and I've got a better looking authentic altered card. Now, does that mean that authentic altered card that, again, without any alteration, I think it's a 6. I think with authentic altered, it may go for the grade of a 1 or a 2. Does this bump it up to the grade of a 3 because it's an attractive authentic altered card? Although the one I had, I'm not going to do this because the one I have is, number one, I've told the story now, but number 2, it's just not worth it. I mean, I have an authentic card that's authentically authentic instead of something that's been manipulated and improved. It's against an ethical code, but I don't think it's a crime to try to improve a card that's already altered. And so then now it's going to come back, you're going to point it out to them, and they're going to put it in the slab, and they're going to say it's authentic altered. Same, but it looks better than the one because it now has a right angle, and it just has a little bit smaller white border at the bottom. And the eye appeal folks may say, hey, this is a better authentic altered. That's the danger of, number one, considering that all authentic altered cards are junk or they would go for some monolithic price. I think the eye appeal argument comes into that as well. It reminds me of Tropic Thunder, one of my favorite movies I've watched on the treadmill. I never saw it in the theater, but I've watched it on the treadmill. and it's got a great cast with a fabulous cameo at the very end. You just have to see it. It's a little bit rude. In fact, it's more than a little bit rude, but it's funny. It's politically incorrect. But there's a scene in there where the Robert Downey Jr. character is telling the Ben Stiller character, you got to go all in on your impression of someone with disabilities. I'm not going to repeat the thing, but if you're going in halfway as an actor, you've got to really own it, be all in. So that just reminds me, if it's an authentic card and it's already not going to get a numerical grade, further doctoring is that being all in to say, look, it's already authentic altered. I'm going to prove it to make it the best authentic altered it could be. It's admittedly trimmed, but now it's been trimmed more, I won't say professionally, but less amateurishly, which is the cards. Again, I'm not going to do that. When I do these thought exercises, I'm talking to myself and I'm just saying, if there's too much reliance on eye appeal, then you bring authentic altered cards into the discussion, which I don't know that we want to do that when we look at authentic cards for eye appeal without the number. Because if you don't have a number, you don't know if it's authentic. I think a lot of people can tell if it's authentic, but cannot tell if it's altered. Like I said, when I got this card back, I thought they made a mistake. It's not altered. This is my card. Now, I didn't own it as a kid, but when I looked at it, I thought they saw something that I wasn't looking that carefully. I'm looking at the surface. I'm looking at 3 of the corners at least, and the other corner is not unsharp. It's just not 90 degrees. Again, I just don't think that's a manufacturer defect. On the other end, when it is a manufacturer defect, that in many cases is indistinguishable from a later alteration. So to grade something as authentic altered, even if it would have been a miscut from the factory, diamond cut, if it doesn't look right, it's going to get that designation. So I'm realizing the eye appeal movement, I heartily endorse that because I think buying the card, not the holder, and that's coming from a guy that started BGS. Grading is here to stay. I think it has been a wonderful contribution to the health of the hobby, way more good than bad. It's allowed the growth of digital sight unseen sales of cards. You don't have it in hand and you have a third-party authentication and grading of a card. That's good. But if we get too much into eye appeal, I won't say it's a problem. It just brings an additional nuance. Do I want cards on my wall that have 1 through 10 and include some A's in there? If it's a really obscure card that I've never seen other than slightly trimmed. In fact, there's some W cards that almost all of them are trimmed. I mean, they're factory cut perhaps, but they're poorly factory cut. And if it doesn't meet the size requirements, it's going to get that. And so to square off the corners a little bit, to narrow the borders, like I said, I'm not doing it, but people have to be doing that because it makes sense. If it's already altered, then let's alter it more professionally and get the better eye appeal. If you're a slave to the number and to the company that's on the grade, frankly, when you have authentic, altered, how do the shill bidders handle that? I think they stay away. It's hard to try to manipulate the price of something for what benefit if it's authentic. If it's eye appeal, again, same thing. I think the shill people, are they trying to bump up and manipulate and artificially raise the price of a high eye appeal card, hoping that new standard high price will hold? What does it hold for? Other cards that are authentic? It's tricky. Like I said, I think shill is more about commodities than it is cards that have complicated stories. A card that has a complicated story that is rare. Again, shill bidding is manipulative bidding. I mean, it's many things, but it's certainly trying to raise the comps, and maybe that raises all boats. But if you had a 52 mantle that went for a really high price, that was an authentic altered card that looked gorgeous, that looked like a 10, I bet that would go for a pretty good price because it's just slightly undersized or had been just barely the whitened border. Again, don't do that. But to test that market, somebody's going to do it. And if somebody gets a lot of money for an authentic card, and it actually could be a shill bidding thing, the 52 mantle that looks literally perfect, if that goes for a 6-7 figure price, something above what is expected, there could be a ripple effect on that. And again, I think that's what the tactical shill bidders want to do. They're not just manipulating a card, they're manipulating the market. They're bidding on one card. It's representative either of a genre or of a player, or sometimes it's a specific card, but a lot of times it's the ripple effect.
Man in the house of